recommendation a year ago that they increase the population limit for that, and they agreed. So now we're going to be able to have eligibility for those funds for another couple of years. So if you see him, make sure to say thanks. So quick hitting bullet points. The beach now has one residential lease fee for all residential leasehold property. That includes those leaseholders that had to pay a lease fee and 5% for rental income. Now there's just one standard residential lease fee, $250 a year. I wanted $40 a year because that's what it costs to administer the leases, but I lost that battle. But bottom line, I think you can see what's going on the beach right now. We have a considerable amount of growth. New home starts are up, appreciation is up, and I think a lot of that has to do with the uncertainty that was removed related to the lease fee issue, with there being like, I don't know, 2,000 different leases it seemed like out there on the beach. We have lifeguards west of the pier for the first time ever. We have a hotel started. We have another one that is possibly on the way. We have, you'll have more miles of road resurfaced this year than you've had in the previous 2 years. So that'll be a noticeable improvement. Initially, East Bay Boulevard. For those of you that, like me, that travel East Bay Boulevard every day, that was initially going to be a 2018 resurfacing. It's now going to be resurfaced by the end of this year. So that'll make a significant difference, I would think. I started a sidewalk gap project. That's something that if you go to the Navarre Library or the Navarre Senior Center, you're going to notice that improvement connecting the sidewalk out to Highway 87. There's another one at Ortega. I don't know if you're familiar with Ortega Street, but the sidewalks didn't end at Highway 98. So that project will have those sidewalks going all the way out to Highway 98. And then we're working on Panhandle Trail, and we have other roadways identified throughout District 4. We're just trying to connect sidewalks and maybe fill in gaps where they existed before. And we had one playground when I took office. We now have 3. The first all-inclusive playground in Santa Rosa County was here in District 4. That's out in the Navarre Sportsplex. And that's been a pretty cool thing to see the kids out there, and it takes a little bit of a use off of this playground here, which I don't have to tell you, if you have kids or friends that have kids, this place gets a ton of use. So that's been pretty popular. Consistent alcohol policy. Well, I'm hearing crickets already. We have a consistent alcohol policy for the first time down here in South Santa Rosa County. Our good friends at the Holly Navarre Water System did a 50% reduction in tap fees for commercial businesses, and that was received very well. And how many of you are familiar with 850 magazine, the business magazine? So nobody then. All right, cool. All right, well, just so you know, there's a business magazine called 850 for the 850 area code. It covers from here all the way over to Jefferson County and Monticello area. Somewhere between 17 and 20,000 is their subscription rate across that area. It is a popular magazine, especially in and around the state's capital, and it's something that a lot of power brokers will focus in on, and business leaders and entrepreneurs will focus in on to know about the goings-on in Northwest Florida. And had an opportunity to meet the publisher of that magazine, Brian Rowland, at the Economic Symposium that Gulf Power holds every year. And that was in October. And I asked him, I said, why don't you ever do a story on Santa Rosa County? I see you hitting all the other counties in Northwest Florida. Why don't you do one for us? And so I said, you know what, you're right. So he decided to do a business spotlight on Santa Rosa County, and that's going to come out in the April-May issue here in the next week or two. So hopefully you'll have an opportunity to take a look at that. So that's pretty much flying really quick through on some highlights. We've got a lot of folks here, so if you're okay with it, I'd like to throw it out for a few questions now, and then if I could reserve a little bit of time for a couple of questions that I'd like to get some feedback on from you. So we'll go ahead and open it up. Yeah, Yvonne.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for holding this.
Thanks for coming.
The outfall project, the $650,000. What was the total cost, and is that project contingent upon? Isn't that a dependent project, and will the county be able to match the balance to actually get it to completion?
With your help, yes. And with the help of everybody in the room, yes. A great point. Yvonne does her homework. So we had a original ask of 1.3 million of the legislature with a 1.3 match, I believe it was. And I remember when I met with Chair Albritton of the Natural Resources Committee, where this money comes from, he had a binder on his desk that was like this tall, and he said, Rob, these are the water quality projects that have applied in the state of Florida. And it was some just ridiculous number, you know, in the several hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think they ended up funding like 65 million. So we did not get our whole project funded, but we got half of what we were asking for funded, which means we're gonna have to make up about 2 million for that project. Yes, I believe that, well, I will put in a request to my fellow commissioners to move forward with that project. I know we got.
Contingent upon, is that within the Baskerville-Donovan, was that a dependent project upon other projects, or was that one of the independent ones?
That I don't know. When they came, we had some legislative priorities that we do every year, and this was not one of the legislative priorities that was agreed upon. But once session started, the state legislature was asking for water quality projects from the county. So I went to the county staff and I said, I know that the survey or the study is not completed yet or published, but have the consultant give me what they believe would be the most important project or an impactful project that we could submit to the state, because if you don't submit, you have no chance of getting funding. So let's submit something and maybe we'll have a chance to get some funding. So that's where that project was selected. And I don't even think at the time that that was selected, we knew all of what the dependent or independent projects were. Bottom line, we have something like $80 million worth of projects that have been identified out there. This is one that would come off the to-do list, so it's a win. But I don't know if it was one of those ones that's dependent on another one. It wasn't a selection that I made, it was something that the consultant and staff gave to me. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Rob, a couple of years ago, we authorized a feasibility study for a community center here in the bar. And they talked about hiring somebody, you know, the University of West Florida or somebody like that was going to front the study. I never heard any more about it after that time. So if we've been able to move forward any further on identifying, because there was a lot of discussion whether we wanted, you know, whether it was a community center, an athletic center, after school center for the kids, all of the above or whatever. And there was a huge number of people submitted a wish list, all of which was going to get crunched and turned into something. I've never seen this something. So.
Well, I'm not familiar with that, but I did hear about one of the needs would be a community center. It was included on the survey that went out when I first got elected. We put a survey out to kind of have folks rank what were the improvement projects that were the most important to them. And the community center did rank last of those projects, but that doesn't mean that it's not a vitally important project. You know, when the Tiger Point Community Center opened, great facility, because we finally have the opportunity to have Santa Rosa County meetings in the south end of the county, right? So that's awesome. But unfortunately, the day it opened up, it was already at capacity. So we have a need for that. We have a need for that in this community. This is the most populous district in the county. It's the fastest growing district in the county. And if we're going to continue to have meetings in the south end of the county, we're going to need a suitable space. The problem is, property is pretty expensive down here. So to find a viable piece of property that the county already owns that we could develop a community center for meetings or other such activities, it's not exactly cost feasible at this time. Now, I did look at this, adding on to this building, right out here actually. This building was originally designed to have an addition placed right here to the west. So right after I was elected, I met with the original architects that designed this building, and we looked at what the cost would be and what would be involved to move forward with that plan of adding on to this building. And it was about $2.5 million. And that was to add a 2-story. The top floor would be unfinished. It would have a capacity of around 350 folks. So that would be something that we could grow into a little bit. But the issue is gonna be what? Somebody tell me what the issue would be with adding it.
Parking.
Bingo. Where are you gonna park? This is already a constrained park. I know that I referred to it the other day as this is Navarre's kitchen. This is kind of our gathering place. It's known as the heart of Navarre. This is kind of where we come together for Thursdays in the park, for town hall meetings, for any manner of things. Chambers located here, tourist information centers located here, but we have very limited parking. So I looked for other parking options here within this park. I looked at converting the Butterfly House into a parking garage. It's not feasible. So there are no options in my mind to have a facility here that would be a community center on the property we own, because it's just not gonna fit, and I don't think folks would think it's a good idea to encourage folks to come to a place and then we're gonna have folks parking in business properties across the street, or we're trying to get people across the street, across Highway 98. I mean, I know I wouldn't wanna be doing that. So I think what this is gonna be is a world-class park. This is going to be one of the best parks in the state of Florida, where we are right here. We have a beautiful building. I don't have to tell you how beautiful the view is. It's a great location, and we do have good parking and good facilities, great facilities to make it a wonderful park. But I don't know that we can make it a community center. So what can we do? We're gonna have to identify, is this gonna be a priority that the community wants? Initially, a year ago, the priority was down here. We're going to do another survey toward the end of this year, beginning of next year, at the halfway mark of my term. And we're going to do the same thing over again, where we're going to ask folks, what improvements do you want to see, and prioritize them so I know how to best spend my time on your behalf. But I haven't spent much time other than that on it, because it was the lowest rated item. Okay?
It seems like. Can I do a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Talking about the park. And again, thanks again for having this meeting as well, Ron. There's a walkway that goes back around.
The boardwalk? Yep.
And so when you're looking at the park, can that be bring back to life and being able to use again? Is that part of the plan?
Yes, he's asking about the boardwalk. Some of you might be familiar with the boardwalk that we had that went along the water and actually used to go over to Cowboys over there when they had the restaurant there. We can do a boardwalk on property that Santa Rosa County owns. It's that whole thing of, putting a boardwalk behind private property without permission or without any way of maintaining it. So yes, we will include the boardwalk as part of the improvements for the park up to the property that Santa Rosa County owns. Yeah. James.
Appreciate you setting up this meeting.
Sure, thanks for
I wanted to ask about the MSBU for Navarre Beach, and currently the leaseholders have paid lease fees, and what I wanted to ask is if you can take the lease fees to pay for our MSBU, and if you would go with the other commissioners if they were to approve this.
Well, I know that with 2006, what was the total? It's around 8 million. It's around 8 million that the leaseholders paid, and what percentage was that of the cost?
It's almost 20 million total project.
But of the local share, we had funding sources for beach restoration that might be, well, you might have FEMA paying for the federal government, state, what have you. But at the end of the day, there comes a portion that Santa Rosa County is going to have to cover in one way, shape, form, or another. And the last time we had it, the leaseholders basically paid 95% of that cost, so $8 million. There was no general fund revenue that went toward that project. That meant that even though tourism and our tourism economy is vitally important to Santa Rosa County, there was no general fund revenue from around the county supporting that. So this time, in listening to folks that the leaseholders, they had told me one of the things that was the most important to them was beach restoration funding. It's actually number one, number two, I believe it was, on the improvement plan in the survey. So I set out trying to see if we could reduce that and add general fund revenue for it. And when we started, the original plan that was presented to me to fund it was identical to the 2006 plan. There was no difference. It was that the leaseholders were going to be shouldering the entire cost. From that, we've gone from leaseholders paying 95% of the local share to now it's 12%. It was 8 million, now it's 2.1 million. Between now and August, I think there's a good chance that that could go to 0. But I don't know where the votes are yet. I know that one of our commissioners has been very vocal on, very supportive in saying that he would like to see that money come from reserves. I think that you're going to see some commissioners keep their powder dry until we get to the August time period. So I'm going to be one of those commissioners. I'm not going to say today if I would be in favor of taking the 2 million and paying the currently what would be the MSBU share. I can tell you that I'm leaning that way. Being completely upfront with you, the one thing that I'm struggling with is what was done with that money that was paid by the leaseholders for those years. What was that money used for? To me, I've got to get a better answer to that question before I can make a policy decision, because ultimately, 9 years from now, when the next beach restoration is due, what will be left will be the policy decision that was made this time. And I want to make sure that it's a good policy decision. I know part of the policy decision I feel has been good, because regardless of what happens, we are for the first time ever going to have general fund revenue going to pay for some of the beach restoration, which means that every Santa Rosa County taxpayer is making an investment in beach restoration. They are making an investment in our tourism economy and our beach. That I feel is important. Everybody in Santa Rosa County shares the benefit. One of the reasons our property taxes are so low in Santa Rosa County is because of our $120 million tourism economy. There's no question about that. So I definitely think that everybody should share in the responsibility there. I can say this, worst case scenario, it's going to be 2 million. Something else, best case scenario is it would be 0, which isn't really 0 because of the money that's already been paid in, right? So I just want to make sure that I would like my fellow commissioners to tell me what they believe the percentage should be. Do they believe that folks that live on the beach should pay nothing toward beach restoration? And by saying that, they would be saying that folks that live on the beach don't receive a disproportionate benefit. That's the reality. I believe that folks on the beach do receive a disproportionate benefit. My number is somewhere in the 5 to 10% max range. Anything more than 10% I feel is too much. That's just me, personally. Other commissioners may feel that it's different. That would mean 10 years from now, when there's no extra money in the bank that's been paid in for lease fees, if I were still here and somebody asked what I thought about that, which is highly unlikely, I would say 10% max is what they should be paying.
Why would there be no extra money?
Well, because of, I would seriously doubt there's going to be another lawsuit. You know, this is a pretty unique situation in that you kind of had this one-time deal where, you know, there was some folks paying for lease fees and there was other folks weren't, and there was some folks that were paying their assessed value for their property. There's some folks that were waiting for the result of the lawsuit or the decision from the Supreme Court. So there was this one-time tax windfall of, what was it, like $4 million? We're not going to have that the next time there's a beach renourishment. Either you'll have fee simple title to your property, or you will have been paying this $250 max lease fee the whole time, which that's supposed to go toward amenities and things on the beach or on the island, right? So there wouldn't be this big chunk of change that is in some holding account for that. It would be, you know, that money's going to be spent on the beach unless the board decides to take those lease fees over that time period and hold them aside. That's kind of what I mean by that.
Where did the big profit come from this past year that I read about how much money you all had in your little savings account this time? Where did all that profit come from?
I use the same word, profit, from the business side of my brain, and I do it a lot. I've been reminded a lot of times when I talk to staff
Where
about
did you
profit, they're
have
like,
all
there's
the
no
extra-
profit, there's no profit.
The extra revenue that was somewhere, where did that come from?
As I said, are you speaking of reserves?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have unrestricted reserves, which when I took office, I think they're around 26 million. And then to apply for funding from the state of Florida, it's almost like when you go to get a loan from the bank. If you have the money, if you don't need the money, they'll give it to you. So it's the same thing with the legislature. You know, if you have 8 million set aside, then they'll consider giving you 8 million. So when we wanted to ask them for 8 million for this project, before I came on the board set aside 8 million in reserves. Those funds came from ad valorem tax revenue. When everybody pays property taxes, that's where our reserves come from. So they set aside, or they earmarked $8 million for beach restoration so they could apply for the grant.
What about the bed tax? Where is that going?
Great question. Bed tax is not paid for by anyone in this room unless you spend the night in a hotel or in a condo here. Bed tax is paid for by folks that visit here. So
Where does that money go?
that money is by state statute to be spent on advertising and marketing for tourism. You couldn't use it for, it has to be for a tourism-related activity. So you could use bed tax collections for beach restoration. That would be an allowable use under the Florida statute. But it's not ad valorem based tax revenue. You hear folks sometimes say, why aren't we paving more roads with the tourism money that we bring in down here? We're sending all our tourism money to Milton. I heard that one a lot. The thing is, you can't use tourism bed tax revenue to pave a road. You have to use it for a tourism-related purpose. Now, we get a lot of latitude in that. The state gives us currently a lot of latitude in that, and that's why you see it going for a lot of different purposes. But bottom line, bed tax revenue is not general fund revenue or property tax revenue.
How much is that account of?
Last year, we had the best year in Santa Rosa County history. We brought in around 2.3 million in bed tax collections.
And how much did they spend? How much was the expenses for tourism?
2 million.
Doesn't a set of that though, wasn't
I have the budget here. I'm pretty sure that's the number, around 2 million. Ken, you have a question?
Just going back to the beach renourishment, I'm curious, I was under the impression that maybe the lease fees would be used to set up reserves for the recurring expense of beach renourishment. I wasn't thinking about the fact that the lease fees were going to be going down so much. I mean, do you guys have an alternate plan to set aside money for this recurring expense?
For beach restoration specifically?
Yeah, beach restoration.
The one that I've been working on is there's a federal program. It just takes, that's one of them. It's something new for us, but it just takes a lot longer for that process to work through. But that is definitely an option for us for next time. There is the 1% of bed tax collections. And quite frankly, when this gets funded, I think that's another viable use of the local option sales tax and another reason for a local option sales tax. And that a portion of that 1 cent should be earmarked for beach restoration. Will it fund all of it? Probably not. It depends on what the weighting would be. But going back to that whole idea of everybody benefits from the tourism economy, so we should probably all be contributing to it. No different than what we do with the military or agriculture. We make significant investments there. So it makes sense that we would make significant investments here. So I'm hopeful that that's something definitely something I'm going to recommend as part of the local option sales tax request. And hopefully we'll be able to get that done this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey?
I'm still trying to get my head around this. Currently, we're now collecting lease fees from all the leaseholds on the beach.
What's that?
We're currently collecting lease fees from all the leaseholds on the beach.
Every residential leasehold property owner on the island has a $250 lease fee. If they have taken just the step of going in and filling out the form to change it from what it used to be, they pay $250 That's the cap.
How much does that generate each year?
I don't know. I think we have 2,000 of them. Was it 400?
I think it's about 450,000.
450 grand.
Okay. And how much has been collected in lease fees since the last renourishment of 2006?
I don't know.
And like you said
2006
earlier,
to
and what
2000 I can
was
answer
that
that
money
one.
used for? Where is that money?
What was told to me before I was elected and when I first came on the board was that that money was used in the general fund budget. That money has already been
Right.
spent throughout the general fund budget.
And also for that same period of time, there have been either assessed or collected and working out.
Pete, I've heard all this. I know
And-
all of
and
this,
hold
but
on.
I mean, we've
that
talked
also-
about this ad infinitum. All I can tell you is where we are today is that the board has at absolute most, an MSBU for leaseholders would be 12% of the total cost, and that would be $2.135 million. That would be the total cost. As far as all the other things that happened before I came on the board, or how that money was spent, or going through that entire thing, I don't want to spend the whole meeting talking about beach restoration again. But that's what I can tell you. That's what I do know, is that right now the most money that leaseholders would pay regarding beach restoration would be $2.1 million, and I'm optimistic that it will be even lower than that. But that's going to require board vote.
I understand
Will you
that.
push for that for us to get it to zero? Because you're our representative, and we would hope that you would push for that.
At the appropriate time, there will be a decision made on that issue, and I feel like it's important that you advocate at the right time to have maximum impact. And I'll just leave it at that.
All I'd like to say, hey, Rob,
Yeah.
I'm really involved in this. One thing I want to say is that we did pay for 95% of it in 2006. And we really would like to pay zero. I mean, that's we feel. Other communities find other ways to do it. But I think we should give the commissioners credit for a couple of things they did. First of all, we do going to have about $2.8 million from the bed taxes going to help pay for the beach restoration. And they did go to the state of Florida and get this 5.7 million, plus we had another
2.7 last year.
And so they did go to bat, and that filled a huge hole. Now, we still would like to be zero, but they deserve credit for what they did to get this bill down to where it's at today. And that wouldn't happen if the commissioners went to state of Florida and did that, so I do want to say that.
Thank you, the legislature, and that was a big-time team effort. But yes, both times we were outside of the funding level, and we moved up significantly one year to get into the funding for that. So a lot of people worked pretty hard on that. That was a big win for Santa Rosa County.
And we still, the War Beach leaseholders are still asking if we could use that lease fee money for beach restoration, even in the future, because it is unique to us that we have the lease fees. So that's what we have. Continue to ask the commissioners to consider, and it's still in front of them. So that's what the decision.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm appreciative of what you've done, and that going from 95 to 12 is pretty good. And I'm not going to threaten anybody that has to go to zero, because I know you're going to be working on that. But what's the plan for the next time we need renourishment? What's the restricted fund that you're going to propose, and how are you going to fund that fund so that we don't have this stuff again?
My recommendation right now is going to be that a portion of the local option sales tax would go toward beach renourishment, and that we continue to work on the federal grant program, which is more of a regional approach. And then you have the bed tax collections, the percentage of bed tax collections that goes toward that, and that's earmarked toward it. And that's what we've got right now. Well, the lease fees, that's going to be a different decision, and there hasn't been a lot of dialogue on that. The one thing that we do know is that lease fee revenue per board decision at this point is to stay on the island, which I got to tell you, I think that's a big deal. Instead of that going into the general fund revenue, to have that $400,000 earmarked for the goings-on on the beach, you know, that's a good deal. Ultimately, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have some of that funding, if not all of it, dedicated toward beach restoration. But we haven't talked about that yet. Yes, sir. And then I'll come back here.
Just real quick, Rob, how much did the 1% pullback on the bed tax create?
$350,000 a year, but that's going up all the time, especially when the new hotel opens. It's estimated that as much as $500,000 additional bed tax dollars will be coming to Santa Rosa County. That'll be pushing us toward $3 million in collections, and that's going to start making a significant impact, especially on the beach. Especially on the beach. We've got some really cool stuff going on there, by the way, and then I'll come to you in the back. Well, I'm going to go here, or he's going to jump me. All right, he's a big physical guy. I just don't want to deal with that tonight. Then I'll come to you. But I just want to mention real quick, we do have some pretty cool projects going that are coming on for the beach, and one of them is to have new signage and landscaping at the entrances to the pier, to Navarre Marine Park, and to the boat launch. Consistent signage that looks the same, to where we have a good consistent look throughout, and improved landscaping at those, to where, and then also some pedestrian features, some protected pedestrian features. And a lot of this stems from volunteers that have made recommendations of what they would like for a number of years, and now we're going to have a consolidated effort to hopefully deliver some of those things that have been requested for a while. But that's coming from bed tax collections. So that's pretty cool. Yes?
Another big issue hanging over our head is the life expectancy of the bridge, and how soon we're going to have to be searching for funding to replace it. And a long range, hopefully, contingent of money set aside when that happens.
Great question. For those of you that don't know, we took ownership of the bridge some time ago. There was some funds that were given to Santa Rosa County to maintain the bridge, and DOT was all too happy to give us that bridge. The reality is, pretty much all of that money has been spent, and so that leaves us with replacing a bridge. Now, I had heard 10 years. I had heard 15 years, so one of the first questions I asked when I got elected is I went to the engineer for the county and I said, what's the deal? What's the number for the bridge? And he said a minimum of 25 years. He said they just got done doing a large rehab project on it just about the time. Remember, they were doing all the blasting and all the work that was going on? That was to kind of repair or do some maintenance for the bridge. So 25 years is what I was told when I got elected. There was a project as part of the Transportation Planning Organization. Every commissioner sits on the TPO. That's basically a group made up of the commissioners from Escambia County here and local municipalities, and it helps to decide where transportation funding gets directed, okay? And one of the projects that was on the list was Navarre Bridge. So I was thinking, well, this is awesome. We've already got Navarre Bridge in the pipeline for funding. So 25 years when this happened, you know, we need the new bridge, we're good to go. No. It was $7 million dedicated to add pedestrian features to the bridge. So basically attach a metal sidewalk to the bridge. That's what the replacement was. So now we have in the long range, what is it called? You have the needs plan. Now as part of the 2040 needs plan, a replacement for the bridge. That project is on the list. If you're not on the list, you're not on the list. Okay, you got no chance if you're not on the list. So I've learned that there's a cost feasible plan, and there's a a long-range needs plan, and you got to start out on the needs plan first, and then if it's agreed upon that there is a need, which there's a need, then they're going to move it and have the evaluation, and then when it gets moved to the cost feasible plan, that's when they're saying, you know what, it's feasible that we have enough money to pay for this bridge, like what happened with the 3-mile bridge that's moving forward in Pensacola. The issue is going to be at that point, where do we want the bridge to go? And I agree with my predecessor and with others on the TPO that said they believe it should go straight where 87 is and come across over near where the wastewater treatment plant is now. And then that would free up this land that we currently have for the bridge. So that's the plan right now, is it's part of the TPO plan, which means that we all get to sit around and wait until the money ferry drops. Yes, ma'am?
I have, I guess, a three-part
Oh
question.
my goodness, I only have short-term memory for one of those.
First thing.
Somebody help me out here.
I think most of the people in this room would feel much better if we had a specific account that the lease fees and all the money for beach renourishment went into and stayed in there.
You
and
do.
wasn't used for anything else.
You do have a specific account that lease fees go into.
Started February last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was retro.
Now we have
2015.
Yeah.
Since then,
Okay.
it goes into an account.
Okay, so everything that's earmarked for lease fees will go into that account.
Yes.
In 8 or 9 years when we need it, it will still be there.
Well, it goes into that account, and then it's what do we do with it? That's, we don't have a policy directive on that. The policy is that it would go into account. Check that box. But how are we gonna spend it? Are we gonna spend it? What are we gonna spend it on? That's a different ballgame. If there was a policy decision, you know, if somebody were to try to use those funds to put in a sidewalk in J, that's not gonna happen, not without a new board vote. So the good news is, right now, those funds are walled off and they are going into a fund. So,
But not earmarked
for any
restoration.
specific purpose, no ma'am.
So
Not
why
yet.
don't we try to get it?
That's gonna be up to the other gentleman that I serve with. That's gonna be a policy decision. And it's also gonna be up to the folks on the beach. So one of the things I have asked is to give me the priorities of the improvement projects that you would like to have done, and to prioritize those projects on the beach specifically. And I believe the leaseholders, I know, came to me about the signs, and there was a couple priorities that they have, and now they're taking that one step further, and they're gonna be voting on that, I think, this weekend. So we'll have what those priorities are, and then I'm gonna ask for a recommendation of the folks that live on the beach. How would you like to see those funds utilized? And I would imagine that if the overwhelming sense is that they would like to have those funds earmarked for beach restoration, it's your money. It's fine with me. You know what I mean? So it's not up to me to make that as a, you know, unilateral decision where I get to decide that. That's not my call. I know that would not be my preference. I would rather put the money to work now. But I could certainly understand that mindset, because you would want to eliminate the risk of there not being funding and having to shoulder the burden with an MSBU 8 or 9 years down the line. So I'm good with it either way.
What would you want to put the money
Well,
on
we had 3
now?
parts. We had 3 parts. That was only 2.
Well, yeah, we're still
No,
discussing.
no,
Right.
what would you want to put the money on now?
You have improvements that are needed on the island, and not the least of which is that, you know, if we're going to provide a world-class guest experience for people that are visiting here or returning visitors here, I think that the service levels out there and the amenities that are there, I think they need to be improved, and we're working on that. But there could be some capital expenditure projects that would be important to folks that live on the island that might not be beach related. And that's what I'm going to be relying on the leaseholders to tell me. If the overwhelming sentiment is that they want those funds to be walled off, then my sense is that's what we'll do. That will certainly be the recommendation that I'll make. But there's a lot of things that have happened in the county so far that, let's say the priorities that were a result of the survey. I didn't agree with all of the priorities that were there, but here again, it's your money. So it makes my job a lot easier, I'll tell you that, if you ask people what they want to do, how they want their money spent, and then you work on that. That makes the life a lot easier, I think.
Are you talking about
So
better streets? What are the world-class improvements you're?
I'm going to let folks tell me that are there, that are living there, what they want to see. As far as service levels, I can tell you that we're increasing the beach sweeping to 3 times a week from 2 times a week. We're going to have the things like the restrooms cleaned and all the trash dumped at all of the walkovers by 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, you've already have the addition of lifeguards west of the pier. These are things that other well-run, successful beach communities have, and I think it's reasonable to expect that we would have them. And it's just us catching up with our growth a little bit, and expectations are a little bit more than maybe they were in the past. But I think that's a good thing, you know? Right now we've got one guy that works part-time on the weekend that is cleaning the restrooms and trying to get the trash dumped on the entire beach. That guy should get an award. Are you kidding me with the effort that he's putting in? Let me finish.
Okay.
That's what we've had on the beach for years now. It's one individual trying to execute and get that done. So that's what I mean by trying to change that focus a little bit, where maybe we have a higher level of service. So that's not the fault of Terry or the folks on the beach. They're doing the best they can with the resources they have available to them. I think it's up to us to maybe give them some additional resources. So yes.
So we do pay the utilities for the public park from the lease fees? And the restrooms and the toilet paper? Who pays that?
The utilities for the public park. What
The
you're
park,
talking?
down on, the who pays?
Lease fees
the-
don't pay for that. No.
Okay, the state
That's
pays
general
for that?
fund. The state
state.
doesn't pay for that. That's
The
ad
county.
valorem tax dollars, general fund.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
What is MSBU? I'm sorry,
A municipal service benefit unit.
because it would be nice at the start of the meeting if you can use an acronym to let people know.
I so get it, because anytime that I'm in a transportation meeting and they start throwing out a tip fund and a tap fund and a trip fund, and I'm like, wait a minute, what was that? I had to go to a class just to learn some of those, so I apologize. If I throw out anything to you that you're like, what is that abbreviation? Please let me know. Like MSTU would be the Municipal Service Taxing Unit. And so yeah, I apologize for not throwing that out. Basically with an MSBU, it's benefit unit. You have to prove that there's some benefit to those individuals that are paying for that tax. That's how one of those would be created. All right, we're coming back to you. Number 3.
Mine is transportation related. 2 areas that I see we need some help. Number 1, on the beach, and I may have to direct this to Gary in the way that.
Please, yes, directed that to Gary. Good call. Woo, gotta go. All right.
Do I dare go out between 3 o'clock and 6 p.m. and try to get over the bridge? I can see traffic for as far as I can see. We need some kind of light, some kind of situation over there. Something to help alleviate the stress of that light down there on 98. And then talking about 98, what the hell is going on with this road? I mean, there's accidents coming right and left. I passed a 3-car accident out here today. There were 3 accidents this way between here and the base day before yesterday. I was coming from Fort Walton.
Well, when they repaved, it should have 6 lanes.
It's terrible.
Did we get that quoted? The members of the media here? What the H is going on Highway 98?
That call it the
yeah.
road from hell. I run the beach road if I have to go to Pensacola, and I just dread going this way.
I have multiple trucks for my business rolling up and down 98 every day. I get it, and I feel your pain. What was the number 1 thing on the survey? Number 1, reduce traffic congestion, improve safety on Highway 98. Just had a meeting about that today. Go ahead, Ken. No,
This ties in with her question. I know that one of the ideas that I thought came out a few years ago that was really good, and I believe it's being studied by the state right now, is the Community Access Road project. We know where that stands?
We do. It's in the PD&E stage, which is the, I'm with you, the planning, development, and environmental. It's basically a fancy acronym for a feasibility study. They're going to see, is this road feasible? Can we afford it? To go back real quick before tied in with the community access road, the bridge right now, without a new bridge, that is as good as that can get. You have 2 dedicated left-hand turn lanes going on to 2 lanes of Highway 98 traffic. That's as good as it's going to get. Now the intersection down there, the 4-way stop, I've directed staff, one of the improvements, it's on the list of improvements, is a free right-hand turn lane there. And I've asked them to do a comparison analysis between reconfiguring the intersection with a roundabout or reconfigure the intersection with a right-hand dedicated right. Right now, the study that they did with Volkert years ago had it at about $750,000 for a roundabout and about $260,000 for a right-hand turn lane. So I believe what you're going to see is the right-hand turn lane, but that doesn't help getting off the island. And so on those weekends, we all know, you know, the Memorial Day, the Labor Day, the 4th of July, we know what's coming with those. But it's not a horrible trade-off considering we get about 5 months of just pure unadulterated awesomeness. And there's no extra charge for awesomeness, as my daughter tells me.
Every weekend though, every weekend it's that way.
So,
Well, not every week. If it's
Spring
a
break
really
weekend,
sunny,
it has-
nice weekend.
Yes.
A lot of people come to the beaches. Dude, we get your dog.
yeah. So then the Highway 98 thing, and then I'll come to the back. The median openings are an obvious area where we could reduce accidents. We have 3 median openings right out front here. Now, part of the education I had when first getting elected is that just because you have the money for something and you have a good project and you want to move forward with something, that doesn't mean that you're going to be allowed to do it. For example, it costs about $30,000 to close one of those median openings. State of Florida won't let us do that, won't let the county perform that work. Then it has to be performed, that's state roadway. So they direct those activities, and there's those different funds that I was mentioning earlier, the TAP fund and the TRIP fund and all of these different, basically I just look at them as different funding buckets, okay, where they put money, transportation funding into these different buckets. And your project has to be in or applied for funding in that respective bucket. And once the money's gone out of that bucket, then you're waiting. So there's everybody competing for funding. So when it's something like the fund that you would use for closing median openings or using for safety, once that money's gone, it's gone. So after just beating my head against the wall for the better part of a year trying to get the median openings closed that have the most accidents on them, particularly along Eastern Navarre Parkway, we're probably going to end up helping out this area a different way, and that is we're going to go with probably one entrance into Navarre Park and have one central entrance into Navarre Park that'll be a much nicer entrance. It'll be a much safer experience in the park. Right now you have an entrance that's very close to the children's playground area, so you have lots of cars coming in right here, right near where kids are playing. You have another entrance that's on the far side down there that really hardly ever gets utilized. So if we went with one central entrance, we'd be able to convert those other 2 entrances into parking, which we definitely need here, although at probably maybe 7 or 8 spots. And we would be able to basically render those median openings ineffective. You wouldn't be able to do anything but really a U-turn, because you wouldn't be able to turn into the park. 2 dangerous median openings along what I consider East Navarre Parkway, which is all the areas from east of Highway 87 over to the county line, are right here in front of you. Right out front here. So that's one of the improvements we can do. The other one is the community access road that Ken was mentioning. And that's basically, are you familiar with the community access road in Destin that all the locals use going out Airport Road? And that would be the same thing here. It's basically a road that uses local roadways. It's usually parallel to a main arterial roadway, in this case Highway 98, and you can use that to get off the main road, and if you live in one of the residential areas off that road, or if there's an accident on the main road, you don't get stuck in those 2 lanes, you can get off to your residential area. So the meeting I had today was to look for funding and to try to include or lay the foundation to include in our next legislative priority list the north-south connectors along Highway 98, Ortega, Fox Den, Panhandle Trail, Whispering Pines, those north-south connectors, to do capacity improvements for them because they're county roads. So we don't have to wait for DOT funding. We have to have funding of our own to put toward it, but if we don't start the project of planning those roadways, we'll never get there. So Panhandle Trail is already in the pipeline. We have a price for that, and we will be lobbying for that in Tallahassee between now and the end of next session. That's one of the top priorities on the list. And so that's important because we have on average 42,000 commuters that go through Navarre to Okaloosa County and back every day. This is the busiest section of Highway 98. So I think you'd probably agree that once you get west of Highway 87, you really don't have as much of a traffic issue because you have 87 north, you have 399, you have ways that you can get off of Highway 98 that you really don't have heading east. So there is progress coming, but it's one of the most frustrating things of the job. The average roadway, from the time you come up with an idea to the time the roadway is done, is 10 years. 10 years. So since we just started the feasibility study for the 6-laning of Highway 98, when do you think construction is going to be done?
Never.
2025, 2026? What do you think traffic is going to be like on East Navarre Parkway in 5 years? I mean, it's going to be like the 405 in LA. I mean, it'd be brutal, and it's brutal now. I look at the loss of productivity. You know, every day we have, you know, I have 8 man-hours each way. I'm spending 16 man-hours just sitting in the truck. I could hire more people, I could buy more equipment, I mean, I could do a lot with that. Instead, I have it spent with folks perfecting their thumb usage of their phone on the way. All right, a couple more, and then I need to ask y'all a question. Yvonne, double dipping.
Is there a comprehensive development plan for the south end? And what I mean by that is I see a lot of development, but I don't see a lot of the infrastructure to support that development. And it seems that if we looked at the land development code and maybe took a sectored approach and, you know, developed a plan that was unique to the south end instead of one that, you know, because the north end, you know, Jay or Chamaca, you know, they're a little different than Navarre because we're sort of landlocked. And, you know, you've got the townhouse, the town center that, or the townhomes that are opening up. You've got a box store, the grocery store's going to be opening up soon or wants to build. But we don't have the stormwater, we don't have the road capacity, we don't have the schools, which I know is not an issue. So it just seems that there's no, you know, you've got trailers next to $200,000 homes. You've got, there just doesn't seem to be any real development long-term plan. And, you know, I know that there was the town home center, you know, the town center years back, and that went away. But is there any, if so, what does it look like? I mean, is it being worked on?
Good question. We talked a little bit about it at the meeting today, and there is a sectored approach that our very talented development services coordinator, Becky Cato, has been working on, and it addresses some of the things you're talking about. We are unique here. We're in a unique area geographically, we're in a unique area demographically, and there are special considerations with development here that maybe you don't have in other areas of the county. Pace would be similar with the growth that they're experiencing. So she is working on a sectored approach. There is a plan in place. It's called the Land Development Code, as you know, and it's a comprehensive plan that is meant to designate certain uses of property, certain densities of property. And I think as that gets upgraded or updated, which they're going through the process now, they have to update the comprehensive plan every 5 years, that sectored approach is something that's going to be part of it or incorporated into it. But at the end of the day, right now, if somebody has a property that's zoned for a particular use, they have a right within the law to develop that property consistent with the zoning. So to me, it is incumbent upon us to start tapping the brakes a little bit on what the zoning is, and is the zoning consistent with the values of the community that they want related to growth, and where they want growth. So I don't really know what the best way is to get there, other than the process that's currently ongoing, because it is such a huge task. when you start thinking about the number of properties and the number of different zonings just in this area specifically, and that's why I think it was incredible to get the Navarre Town Center done. And to have that just have been dismissed the way it was, I thought was a real disservice to all the people, especially in this area, that worked so hard to bring that online. It was phenomenal to get that done. So right now, the only plan that we have in place, Yvonne, is the land development code and the existing zoning that comes with it. And I think one of the differences maybe has been, I'm hoping that it's helping. I know I'm trying to not approve every variance that comes before us, and trying to do that by educating some of my fellow commissioners in the public by asking how many variances did we have come before us last year and how many of them were denied. It's less than about 5%, meaning pretty much everybody that comes, brings a variance, gets approved. That would tell me that our land development code probably isn't a very strong document if it's not going to be followed. And I credit Ed Carson. He really kind of changed my outlook on how I should view that document. Either it's going to have teeth or it's not. And he talked about when he served on the commission for the state of Florida, and that he said it was so rare that they ever granted a variance. I mean, you would have to have a true unique situation for them to grant a variance. Otherwise, if you bought the property, you knew the conditions when you bought the property, developed the property consistent with the zoning that you had when you bought the property. You know, and now if the county changes the rules on you, you know, that may be a different consideration. That's outside of your control. So what I've tried to do is in the zoning board, when variances come up or conditional uses come up, I've kind of taken a different approach now. Is there something unique with that property or unique with this situation that would warrant granting that variance? And the number that I have approved, definitely in the last 6 months, is minimal. I think it's maybe 2, 3 max, something in there. So that's kind of my benchmark now. I've noticed that we haven't approved as many lately, so maybe that's a good first step. But it's not a great answer, I know. But I think we have to improve the land development code. I think we have to honor that code, and then we probably have to have additional public input with folks saying we want to have this type of development in our neighborhood, and then we can maybe react to that. Yep.
You talked earlier about all aid water, a lot of water is reduced or raised by 50. Is that just for a specific period of time, or is that long term?
It was for a year, I believe, yeah.
So is that still a problem for growth here? I mean, you gotta have water in order to get rid of it, and at a cost. So if the water tap is more expensive than the land, I'm not saying it's that high, but it's pretty expensive, that does inhibit growth for some retailers. They've addressed it short term, but long term, it probably still needs to be resolved for us to get some growth.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for James too much here, but I will say whether we had a single commercial development come online, what it does, and especially what economic development professionals told me it does, is it sends a message that we are pro-business and that we're trying to be as supportive as we possibly can. If you're having a decision between coming to Santa Rosa County or Escambia County, you should come here because we're going to work with you. And you're seeing that a little bit with some of the other utilities around Northwest Florida. But at the end of the day, market conditions are going to dictate primarily where people are going to go. And you know the old expression, retail follows rooftops. We will have no choice but to grow as it relates to retail businesses as we continue to add more rooftops and more families. So I want to ask you a question of the group real quick and just kind of get a little bit of feedback. I'm sure that you've heard about the local option sales tax discussion, and there's this thing that's come up for the first time ever. You probably haven't heard a lot about that. The courthouse, maybe you've heard a couple of things about that. I don't know, it's kind of new to me. But I'd just like to throw it out there. Local option sales tax, do you think that it should be specifically for the courthouse? Or do you believe that a local option sales tax should be for, similar to what Escambia County does, where they can use it for roads, They can use it for infrastructure projects. They can use it for sidewalks. They can use it for parks. They can use it for economic development. It's not walled off for a specific building or one specific project. And I'm going to have anybody else answer this except for Yvonne, because we've had a few people doing all the talking in here. So I'd love to hear from some folks in here, real quick, if we could, about that. Yeah, with the local option sales tax. Go ahead.
Well, a 1% option sales tax will
But
not.
you'll get your chance, Yvonne. Just
Yeah.
that's a good idea, though. I like the split of half and half. 50.
The
Makes
general
sense.
fund to take care of these needs that we have.
What do you think, Kim?
I worked in Georgia for a number of years, and they do their special local option sales taxes where they commit to a certain time period. I believe they have a 5-year limit, or they have to also specify the maximum amount of money they want to raise. And the tax sunsets whichever comes first. If they raise the amount of money in 3 years, it ends. If they don't have the amount of money when 5 years comes, it ends, unless people approve renewing it. I know that doesn't answer your question.
In
but
Florida, they won't let us do that. It's based on time. So if you want to do it, you have to designate a specific period of time, 5 years, 10 years, 6 years, whatever. And let's say you raise more money. Let's say the courthouse is $40 million, and you're doing your thing for 5 years, and you raise $50 million. Even though you paid it off at 40, that extra 10 million, you don't have to necessarily apply it to that. It's for a length of time.
Just my own personal opinion, I think you would have more success in this county specifying one project and focusing on that and showing that you can get that done instead of saying,
Why do you
well,
feel
we're
that
going
way?
to do all these sort of things.
I've heard folks say that. Tell me why you feel that way.
Well, I got here in 2003. They just had a lost election in 2002, and they had started out just for the courthouse, but then they added on some transportation funding, and they added on some other facilities. I don't remember now all the add-ons, but people felt like the county wanted too much, and it failed badly. And I think it happened again. I'm not sure. I'm getting older now, and I don't remember as well as I used to, but I think that at least 2 or 3 times since I've lived in this area, the county has asked for a sales tax and hasn't been specific enough on their intent, and people haven't trusted the county to spend the money for what they're saying they would.
And 2 things real quick to follow up, and I'll put this out to everybody. That one there, it was to, the referendum language was to build a new courthouse, to renovate the existing older courthouse, and to make improvements to the South End Annex. That was that one. And yet it's interesting, though, that virtually everybody here talked about that project. They always mention these transportation projects. And yet there were no specific transportation projects associated with that one. But everybody, most people say that, so there's got to be a reason for it. And then the other thing was the trust factor. And I had somebody ask me today, they said, well, where do you think that trust factor argument comes from? The last time there was a successful sales tax was the jail. Everybody talks about that one. Had numerous successful sales taxes, one going on now for the school system. And theirs is not specific to any one project. It runs for 10 years. I'm wondering when there was a project in Santa Rosa County history that maybe that trust was lost. I'm wondering when there was a local option sales tax that there was this betrayal of trust that resulted in the feedback, because I hear that from folks as well. We don't want to give a blank check, we're doing that one, or why are we going to do some broad-based sales tax initiative? It needs to be about one thing. I'm just wondering where you think that maybe comes from. Just all politicians are basically liars, cheats, and thieves, and that's when.
History books are full of them.
See? What do you think, sir?
I think it's for a specific project with the sunset, you said, because once it goes into the general fund, it's up to you and the other 4 commissioners to make the decisions. And maybe the primary priorities you mentioned. What's the top priority? Let's go for that one thing, get it over with. You go into the general fund, it can be spread depending on your influence, or his influence or hers to make the decision.
Thank you. Any other comments about the local option sales tax? And Yvonne, jump on in here. Okay?
Sure.
Yvonne, go ahead.
I think Ian mentioned splitting it, and I think to put it on the ballot, if it was split and put on the ballot, like half dedicated specifically for the courthouse, and then half dedicated specifically to capital improvements. I know you can't specify, at the beginning that it would have to be earmarked later, but if it was specified for capital improvements, there might be a better chance of it passing than lumping it together. I think the Milton is going to be a hard sell, just because there's such pushback other than those who live in downtown Milton, the Milton Courthouse. So I think if it's tied together, I don't think it'll pass, but I would be in favor of splitting it on the ballot to at least allow people that choice who are maybe in favor of the capital improvements, which we need the funding for, but not necessarily the funding, it's not that they're opposed to funding the courthouse, just the location. So instead of all or nothing, at least there's that choice.
I've had some folks tell me recently that they would vote against the sales tax just because it might provide an opportunity for the courthouse to go where they want it to go, instead of having to go downtown. I have to tell you, that's a pretty selfish, scary place to be from a policy position standpoint, because for Santa Rosa County to be competitive, we're going to have to diversify where we get our money from. Right now, I think we're like 53 or 54% property taxes is where we get our budget funded from. So if we don't get other sources of revenue that can take pressure off of that, there's got to be a cumulative effect to Escambia County getting $35 million a year from their local option sales tax that they put toward their infrastructure, they put toward their improvements, they put toward their infrastructure. There's got to be a cumulative effect to that, I would have to believe. And I'm not saying I want to be like Escambia County, I just like to compete with Escambia County. I'd rather see us compete here and keep more of those dollars here instead of subsidizing their competitive advantage over us. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. So that's another split. That's good feedback. James?
The last time that the courthouse went on the ballot, it failed by like about 58%, and there was a sunset.
6,000 votes, almost 6,000 votes.
Yeah, it was
Right.
a landslide. But the provision in that was there was a sunset in 5 years. And I went to a meeting on Monday and saw that y'all were discussing possibly 10 years for a sunset. Well, I think one thing is if you make it worse, it's gonna go down in flames worse if you make it worse. I believe also that the courthouse, if this is for the courthouse, all the funds need to go to a courthouse, and they shouldn't go to anything else but the courthouse. I don't think there's going to be too much confusion and too many things where one group will want money for this, another group will, and I don't believe people will vote for that unless it's directed to one and one only thing, which is the courthouse.
That's good feedback. I heard from folks, when I was walking in neighborhoods in the bar and Gulf Breeze, and I'll tell you, delivering a courthouse, that wasn't on their top 5. It was more of, you want me to pay money for a courthouse that's going to go in Milton? I don't go to the courthouse. I have people tell me, I've lived here 10 years. I've been to the courthouse once. And they're like, now, my house is flooded, and all my belongings are at the street right now. If they were in Villa Venice, or in some of those neighborhoods that flooded, they're like, you think I care about a courthouse right now? I gotta get new carpet because my house flooded. What I care about now, if you want to do a local option sales tax to do stormwater drainage, to improve flooding in Holly by the Sea, well, maybe I would consider it. And so maybe that half and half deal might work, because it's, okay, you get your courthouse, but I'm going to get some stormwater drainage. I'm going to get a sidewalk to where my kid can play, and not worry about getting hurt or whatever. So that might be some. Maybe it's 5 years and it's a ½ cent toward the courthouse and it's a ½ cent toward CapEx.
And if you're going to do that, at least let it be 5 years though, because that'll be a way it'll, or even shorten it. I mean, whatever you gotta do to get it passed. I mean, that's the whole
Right.
purpose.
Right? Yes, sir.
You know, the primary objective of the money is simply for the courthouse, but you're looking at a lot of other peripheral projects that go along that could be funded, okay? So instead of a half and half deal to where everyone's confused about where these funds are going and earmark an 85% point, this is for the courthouse. This could be a reserve for stormwater. This could be a reserve for these sidewalks. This could be a reserve for closing up, you know, different things, doing different projects. But it's not so much money to where everyone's concerned about where it's going or who's stealing it or whatever else that these the citizens' concerns might be, where the other money's going, and you're still funding the vast majority of the project that you want to complete.
So it's not necessarily identifying a specific project. We're going to repave Panhandle Trail, but it would say we're going to have a certain percentage of this money go toward resurfacing roads, to where we know going into it, if it raises X amount of dollars, we're going to put so much toward roads, we're going to put so much towards this, so much towards this.
Just something where the community feels like they're getting something back. These people don't go to the courthouse. They could care if one even existed, okay?
How many have been to the courthouse more than twice in the last 10 years? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, not many.
I mean, it's, yeah,
So
the
you know,
percentage is
there's
down.
no emotional attachment to this. All you hear is 50 million, which, by the way, we don't have a price tag on the courthouse, by the way. We don't. We don't know what the price tag's gonna be. So anywhere that you hear it's 50 or 60 or 30 or 40, that hasn't been determined yet. You have to have a building first, and you have to have a design of the building first before you can get the cost.
And it doesn't have to be this huge opulent structure like I've heard thrown bandied around different circles. You know, we're not wrong anymore. A simple building to where you can hold court is all you need. You know, yeah, I understand this is somewhere that should hold specific distinction about it. It is a courthouse, but
This is something
we
I
don't
wanted
need
to bring
marble
with me
floors
tonight.
anymore.
I thought for sure that, you know, this might come up, but this is the support material that I have on the courthouse. I've been through. And one of the things that it talks about in here, going back to 1999, was what was the needs that they identified, the size of the building in 2000, the first time they did the local option sales tax, they recommended a 111,000 square foot building. And they break out how much it was supposed to be for clerks and how much it was supposed to be for courts and guardian ad litem and the state attorney and the public defender. And so now you have folks that, you know, you're in a county commission meeting, you're in a forum, and they step up to the microphone and they say, well, I think the courthouse should be 70 or 80,000 square feet and it should be 20 million. I mean, how do you do that? You know, I mean, it would be like me going in to say, you know, I want a Mercedes and I'm going to give you 25,000 for it. That's what I want. And I'd be like, what? You know, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
If you decide that you want to have certain amenities, if you're going to need 8 courtrooms and you're going to need, you know, a state attorney's office and a public defender, guardian ad litem, then I tell you where we agree is you don't let them dictate this extra space. And you just identify what do we need to do the job. And anything more than what we need to do the job, we're going to have to cut that out if we want to get it done. But I think we're probably going to be looking at a building that's not 135,000 square feet. I think we're going to be around 120,000 square feet is what I'm trying to get to. And that'll get the price down around 40 million. All told. Now that's also not soft costs, that's total project. That's everything. You see some reports in the newspaper where they try to compare our courthouse to the Okaloosa County Courthouse. The Okaloosa County Courthouse was 26 million for soft costs only for 4 courtrooms. Ours was 30 million for soft costs only and 8 courtrooms. Theirs was half the size. And you got people trying to compare our project with their project. It's apples to oranges.
While you're on the subject,
We got a couple more, and then we're gonna go ahead and call it a night.
On sales tax.
Ken and Inger.
okay. On the subject of the courthouse, I know you've been very adamant about keeping the location in downtown Milton, and the city is buying some property to put that facility on. I don't know the details as well as you do, but I really I don't understand why that location is preferable. Can you explain your commitment to that location?
I was originally one of those folks that was, there's no reason why we should put it in downtown, because it floods, right? We don't, it's in a floodplain. We don't have parking there, right? The traffic's awful. The distance, the average distance travel time there, it's not convenient. What were some of the other ones? There's no room for future growth, right? I heard all of those objections as well. And then a friend of mine that I have a lot of respect for, Steve Williams, said, look, Rob, I know that you've already made up your mind on the courthouse deal, but just do me a favor. I'd like you to do some homework on a few of these things, and then come back and tell me if you still feel the same way. And that's where this comes in. You know, stuff like travel time studies, stuff like cost comparisons. This is from March of 2001. This is a cost comparison between the jail site and downtown. What's one of the things you've heard? We own property in East Milton. Why aren't we building on the property in East Milton, right? It's cheaper out there. No, it's not. They evaluated that in 2001. You look at things like average travel distance. You know, we actually did a survey. We actually had a company that we paid for to do the travel time from different parts around the county that listed the locations, the proposed locations for a courthouse, and what the average travel time was for all of them. The shortest average travel distance from parts all around the county, downtown Milton. Then you look at start looking at the traffic issues. You know, most of the traffic issues you have are Willing Street eastward, going toward Highway 87 and the industrial park. And the busier the industrial park got, the worse the traffic got. You could wait at that light at Willing Street for a while in the afternoon. But once you got through Willing Street, there was no traffic issues. Traffic moved on. Courthouse is closing, you know, 5 o'clock. Everybody's already gone. So the floodplain deal, that was another one that we heard. Yeah, it's in a floodplain. So are a considerable portion of the properties in Santa Rosa County. But not just that, you're going to have a premium to build in a floodplain, right? There's going to be an additional cost. So you identify that cost, and then you start determining, that's where it's a judgment call. Are you going to be able to put the building in a place where it's going to have the most benefit for Santa Rosa County? And can we build the building where it won't flood? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a premium to that. It's about $1 million. It's about $1 million more to put it there. So then you start looking at land cost. You start looking at parking. There is ample parking there. There's more than enough parking for that facility in downtown Milton, especially when you use the Pine Street properties there along Pine Street. So I heard a lot of the same things. The last one would be room for future growth. The building that was proposed is a complete judicial center that would have courts, clerk, state attorney, public defender, and guardian ad litem. You have a 10,000 square foot building down there now that is a Fisher Hamilton building. That building would no longer be necessary. The existing courthouse is 50,000 square feet. That would no longer be necessary. There's 60,000 square feet of additional space for future growth if you need it. But if you read the backup material, you'll know that the building that was designed last time that went to a referendum, it says right there in the backup that this building will provide for adequate space for the life of the building. It'll hold up to 300 employees. We got about 120 that work in the courthouse now. So by the time we need another courthouse or another judicial center, that's part of the issue, is that Santa Rosa County's done a horrible job of communicating what it is exactly that we're asking us to pay for. You know, I've heard 15 different things here tonight, and the confusion James talked about and others have talked about. You know, what do you want? What are you going to build? So I think that communication piece could definitely be improved. But we're talking about not a courthouse, but a judicial center. And Santa Rosa County has, what's that?
That's how it needs to be marketed. You'll get a lot more feedback from the community, positive instead of negative, as a courthouse.
I would hope so. And I think that hopefully we'll do a better job, or the county will do a better job of getting that word out there. But the reality is Santa Rosa County has to pay for these judicial services, no matter if you put them in 6 different locations or you put them in 1 location. That's the reality. And anybody in business will tell you that usually when you're talking about these centrally located service type businesses, it's better to have them in 1 building than it is to have them in several. You're going to have some shared savings there. But at the end of the day, if don't do an adequate job of communicating the message, if it's confusing, or if people want to have that look at me moment, if they want to have a moment for self-promotion, because this is an emotional issue, right? So if you want to get a few moments at the microphone, you want to get your name in the newspaper, just start talking about the courthouse. Somebody will quote you. Believe me, it's going to happen. So, you know, you have folks that might recommend a piece of property that they know is not feasible, that they know has been analyzed before. 2001, the East Milton jail site property was found wanting. They evaluated it, and they found that it was not a feasible site. And yet, we have folks putting that forward as if it's a new idea, and what it does is it confuses people. It makes people think, well, why in the world are they building a courthouse in Milton when we have free property in East Milton? Those politicians. So I think, you know, one thing that's different this time is you have a group, a chamber coalition group, and I think you have some other important leadership groups like Neighbor and others that are making up their mind on this issue. But we actually have folks that are for this now. I don't feel like politicians should be out there asking for this local option sales tax. Sure, you talk about what the benefits would be, but this has got to be a locally driven effort. This has to be where folks are listening to, well, how should the ballot language be? It shouldn't be how Rob wants it to be. It should be a kind of a consensus of not a make everybody happy thing. That's what they did in the last one, and that's why it failed. Well, pick your location. Give me a yes or no on this location, and are you for this? Or you got to pick one location. We did that. And now we need to figure out how best to ask for the local option sales tax, but it's got to be a business-driven effort and a community-driven effort. I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to come down and have a conversation. This has been very helpful for me. I love getting this feedback because it helps me do my job on your behalf. It's been an unbelievable challenge thus far from a leadership perspective, but an unbelievably rewarding experience. I absolutely love the service, and I love having the opportunity to represent you. And I hope that I'm available to you at any time to call, and that I'm responsive to you and getting your questions answered. And if not, then please talk to Gary about that. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, y'all. Thanks very much.
And this is Randy Meredith for Navarre Newspaper. You have just witnessed a live meeting here from the Chamber's Visitor Center, and thank you very much for watching.